So we're going to tackle the chapter on preparing a research report. Most of this I've formatted for your sort of applicability with your MAE final project. So just know like different disciplines require different types of things, but in general, these are the kinds of things you'll need to know for that big final project that you'll do during your student teaching or internship. So we're going to tackle the chapter on preparing a research report. Just know that I've kind of tailored this to be as applicable as I can about your internship, your final MAE project. Your advisor may require a little more or a little less, depending on the discipline, but this is for general consumption. So objectives, we're going to look at the key items, and then we're going to talk about formatting. So some general guidelines. This report should give enough information for the study to be replicated. At the end of the day, we should be able to pick up and do this study again without asking questions. When you start writing, you should write everything that comes to mind, and then we'll worry about revisions after that. But it's sort of like a brainstorming, just dumping what's in your head. And I usually start with the methods because that's the easiest to me. It's the most straightforward. That's the how you did the study, the instruments, those kinds of things. Then I move to the results because there's a lot of structure related to that. And you're basically just saying, here are my results. And then I go back and tackle the intro and the lit review because for me, those are the hardest parts to write because kind of thinking about what do I want readers to get like off on the right foot and that kind of thing stresses me out a little bit, gives me some anxiety. So to get some momentum, I usually start with methods, move to results, and then I go back and tackle the intro. The editing is going to be time consuming, and just know in advance it's not a one stop, like I write this once and it's done kind of process. There's going to be multiple edits. So in terms of formatting, we use APA in my content area. You may use MLA or Chicago style or some other kind of style, but just be consistent. For APA, I find that the OWL online writing laboratory, if you Google OWL APA, I find that that is the easiest spot for me to find what I need. And it seems to be the spot that covers almost every single possibility that I might need an answer to. If you are not good with grammar, punctuation, spelling, and all those kinds of things, you definitely need to do a grammar check. And a grammar checker can be a lifesaver when it comes to that. In terms of the title page and abstract, the title page should clearly communicate what your study is about. And then the abstract gives a chance for you to, in a sort of in a nutshell, describe what your study is about and what the results were, and then what that means. And it's usually 250 to 500 words. It's a difficult thing to write, I think, sometimes to be super articulate like that, but really important because somebody who's looking about like whether or not they would want to read your study is going to look at that abstract and make a determination based on what you say in that abstract if they're going to continue to read. So here's an example, and you can see this is something that I published right before I came to Truman. So you can see purpose, method, results, and then conclusion. Super concise and kind of gets to the nitty-gritty of things real quick. So that intro, this should help the reader understand why there's a need for the research project, enough background that there's a case for why that research is needed. Your purpose statement and your research questions should be listed articulately, clearly. And this also gives you a spot to define any variables that the reader may not understand. So if I talk about like motor appropriate time on task, as a physical educator, I know what that means, but somebody else reading my manuscript may not know. That's an operational variable I would need to explain. It also provides a spot for you to foreshadow or outline what's going to happen next in the manuscript. So it gives the reader a sense of the flow and where they can expect to find answers next. The lit review is usually the largest part of the paper, and that's because it addresses not just the literature that has come out. So you have historical literature, but also recent literature. These are the kinds of things that you are going to compare and contrast your findings against. Same with the theoretical framework. That gives us sort of the gold standard against which we're measuring your results. So theoretical frameworks give us like what we know to be true about the world. So we might talk about self-efficacy, Bandura's theoretical framework, or something else that's more applicable. But we have to go ahead and define and then describe all of those kinds of things, what we know to be true in this literature review. Should be primary sources. This is also where you'll state your hypothesis if you're doing experimental research. And there should be some sort of brief summary at the end that kind of ties this all together. The method is the recipe part. I think it's the easiest part to write, but it's going to contain the statement about getting IRB approval. It's going to provide info about your research design. It's going to talk about how you found your participants or recruited them, the demographics of your participants, the timeline, and the procedure in enough detail that it could be replicated. We're also going to talk about how the data were analyzed and describe each of the instruments. We're going to disclose any limitations. And then we're also going to also describe the measures of trustworthiness if this was a qualitative research study. In the results, we're going to use appropriate descriptive statistics, so the mean, median, mode, whatever is applicable. But then we're also going to use our more advanced statistical analysis measures. So if it's a t-test, ANOVA, something like that, we might have a t-value or an f-value. There's a very specific format that is used to describe those results. And they will either be described in the text or in graphic form or table form, but not in both. So if you're going to put it in a table or you're going to put it in a graph, then you don't also put the results in text. It's one or the other. Both causes redundancy, and that's not good with writing. The discussion allows us to look at those results under the lens of what we know to be true from the theoretical framework and previously published literature. So we're going to compare and contrast our results against what we know to be true. What's similar? What's contrasting? It's the comparison. So using those sources that we had in the literature review, we're pretty much going to hit most all of those in our comparison and contrasting of our results. And it also gives us a chance to say, like, if our results were similar, here's why. If our results were in contrast, here's why. And so the implications are listed as part of that, along with recommendations for future research. Last part is the references, appendices, those kinds of things. Definitely needs to have proper formatting. Do not rely on a cut and paste reference. You need to make sure that the formatting is correct, and all of the references that you have shared in text need to be on the reference page, and there should be no references on the reference page that weren't cited in text. There needs to be alignment between the in-text and what's on the reference page. References should be relevant and current, and you got to make sure that your writing is free of grammatical errors. So revise, reread, proofread, let somebody else proofread, and it's probably going to take a couple times through. So in summary, you can see here's the different sections. Writing a good research report takes a lot of time, but it is well worth it.